Hi there, Randy Green here. Let us continue. And this is podcast number 3. Of course, you can listen to it independently, but I would recommend that you listen to podcast 1 and 2, from alien to extra systemic, and from generic human to fifth cycle human. And here we are then going into looking a little bit into the Changemaker material that's part of the whole project, Changemaker material, which I have made on my website. So you kind of get an understanding on, okay, the whole academy, what's that about? Well, it is about, you begin with the historical context in the perception logs and in the 6 books I have written, and you get a certain terminology, you get a certain understanding, and then you move into the progression work, where you then begin to learn with your own energy system and your own timelines, and you figure out what that is about and what type of reality you're connected to and what your ancestral history is and what is in your template and what's in your energy system and what you need to clear out, and all of these difficult steps that will individualize us as beings and humans on this planet inside this enclosure, which I have now explained to you are artificially constructed. It is close to the abyss. It is in the outer domain. It should have been shut down a very long time ago, when it was clear that the restoration program to clear out the effects of the timeline event and the solidification and the what we call inversion of the original viable consciousness units or genetics failed. Then it should have been shut down, but the elders of our reality field continued to talk to the councils and said, we can do this, and they invited in some of what we call scientists from the Draco system, because the Dracos are very skilled at working with genetics, and with that opened up a door that led to the hijacking and takeover, because they came in and promised that they would be able to upgrade and develop humanity out of the circumstances they were in, since the Draco or reptilian genetics have not been hit by the same level of regression as many of the other races in our quadrant, such as the avians and the insectoids that also used to be human a very long time ago, but now have reverted to what they are today in the 4th dimension, and technically have lost any potentials for continuation, which is why many of them choose to go into android bodies, and they're still trying to traverse, sojourn different reality fields to gather their genetic composition that will restore their original vessel. So this is also some of the things that are going on. So we are in this very complex galactic or universal history that dates far back with the original collectives of that was spawned out from the infinity field, some of the flaws that were already there, some of the problems when we shifted from one universal cycle into another, the creation, sorry about that, the creation of the LPU, that were under the control of the D13 collective, and how they have just continued to focus more and more on the nuts and bolts in the technology, and in that have created 3 lineages that are now completely relying on technology, going into the extreme with the transhuman worlds, technocratic worlds, right? So we're having that machine world, we're having that problem, and then there are what we call the fallen ones that are part of the dark collective, and then we have what we could call the parallel universal matrix races, which have not yet got a real name. They are collaborations of different races, so we can't really uniformly call them this or that or whatever. We call them the PUMs, if we want to call them something. PUM, parallel universal matrix races. The PUMer, right? Sorry about that, not to discredit them or anything, but they have not yet been classified as a group of beings. The other 2 lineages are more classifiable because they stem from what we call the original density 2 or middle domain races of our universal matrix, as well as the dark ones were part of the original actually inner domain or LPR3 level that took a severe hit during the timeline event and literally blasted a lot of the Syrians and the fifth cycle Syrians and their communities into the third cycle of the previous universal cycle, from where they've been trying to get back ever since. And since they were technically pushed into pockets within the abyss, it has been a very difficult journey for many of them, and most of them, 99%, have lost the ability, but to get back. But as a releaser, I have also, the first step I actually began in 2007 was to begin to release as much of what was viable, so to speak, in the third cycle. And then I've worked my way into the fourth, and now I am getting ready to go into the fifth. So here, the sum up. But once you have done the progression work or the progression course material, and you have kind of got an idea of, okay, I am something. And the whole thing, I am whatever, that's not what we're talking about here. We're not using that terminology per se, because I rely more or adhere more to the Theravada, where we kind of understand there is no I am, but there is an expression of our consciousness potentials in different personality structures. Inside this reality, the enclosure, I call it the personality matrix because it's artificial. Matrix is a kind of something that's artificial, where a structure, we could say that's something that is more original, or a configuration, if you like. So we have taken on different energy systems. That is our energetic configuration, from where our consciousness potentials have been able to express themselves and develop into different life forms, and to again follow with the 12 lineages and the 12 universal cycles and the 12 dimensions and the 4 domains of each divided into 3. We could say the outer domain that we are existing in is reconstructed enclosure into quantum atomic molecular, which is inaccurate, and we actually need to go through these layers that are via our biofield, our emotional field, our mental field, that are connected to the biofield, are connected to both the molecular state, but also to the quantum fields, and the emotional field are connected to the molecular state, but also to some degree to the biofield, again, administered via the mental field. And that's part of the artificial construction and are controlled by alien technology and inserted programs. So that's kind of what you work your way through in the progression work. And then you get out of the base program, you get ready to work as what we call a holographically oriented human, with a beginning of an activated energy system, where you begin to remember some of your prior configurations and some of the prior versions that you have been on different, I call them code streams of the true wells, and they are timelines. Time is artificial, it's part of the timeline event. It was not there before. Outside our enclosure, there is no time. So with that understanding, we understand it's code streams. Code streams are part of the reality field that we are linked up to in our original energy configuration. And there we have 6 layers that are connected to the outer domain and the middle domain. That's the 6 layers, where we have the lower level, the first 3 levels, that goes with dimension 4, 5, and 6, if you like, that the original version of the outer domain that had that configuration mirroring in what we call a more solidified state, the original middle domain that in that manner had the higher version of the 4th, 5th, and 6th, but they are not divided into dimensions as we understand it. Here they are divided into code streams, vibrational field, and radiation field. So in the outer domain and the original version of the original density 1 were what we call extra added in dimensions that were close to the abyss. They were always contemporary. They were always changeable. They were supposed to be in flux, all depending who visited the outer domain and what type of work they had to do there. So that's why when we talk about the original density 1, before the timeline event, we had the crystal pillars that keeps a configuration within what we could say the progressive races and what we wanted to do here. So that's part of the original technology. Then we had the timeline event, and the pillar crystals, the plasma pillar crystals, were then rearranged again, because these crystals can both be crystalline, but they can also be holographic. They are holographic and crystalline. but they can shapeshift, so to speak. They can transmorph into a different type of crystalline structure if necessary to create different type of versions of organic matter, let's just call it that, but with the lowest point in the fourth dimension as we understand of it. These original fourth, fifth, and sixth dimensional levels are the ones that are pushed outside the enclosure, and that's where the incoming hijacking races have had their headquarters. They demolished the sixth. I talk a little bit about that in Reconstruction of the Planetary Soul. They demolished that one quickly to ensure that the gate systems out into what we call the highest level of the middle domain were shut down, and with that taking away the restoration program potentials to get out. And with that also got access to portions of the original racial library from where we have got our symbol inserted into the Book of Life. And with that got access to our templates from where they began creating artificial energy systems and replicating these and cloning organic vessels in the artificial fourth and artificial fifth, and creating new, what we call enhanced human societies, outside of which many are linked to the ones that are called the bloodlines inside this reality. So that's the hidden people. So that's the two layers of the outer domain we technically have: the enslaved, the incarcerated, the imprisoned inside the enclosure, test guinea pigs, test animals, test whatever. It's all for their grand purpose of hybridization and continuation of themselves. The fourth and fifth dimensional races that exist outside, that are of which many are leaving because they belong to the old world order, since the top of the old world order is gone and they have moved on. They are as well. Some of them have joined the PUMs, others have joined the Dark Ones, and others have joined the machine world. So that's kind of what's happening on our reality field right now. And because of that, they have now begun recreating what we call the new reality programs. It's called the event. And the reason why it's called the event programs, which I put onto it, is because it's not one event, but there will be a series of events, which I will begin to explain in this series of videos as well. But here we are laying the foundations so that when I begin to explain these programs, you're completely up to speed with, okay, that's why, that's how it is, and that's what it's all about. And the reason why I want to do that, to create that higher way of understanding, because it is a high way of understanding, but it's also a program. The event program is a high way. It's an amplification vector that runs through a matrix of different systems that are to be reconfigured and recreated. And we're here talking about our enclosure configuration, the whole structure or the whole matrix behind the construction of the enclosure is to be transformed entirely to match the fourth and fifth dimension of the original outer domain reality field, but now in a configuration that is based upon host fields from the parallel universal matrix. So that means they are taking it into the original configuration of the outer domains, where it's possible to change reality field using developmental programs and a very specified alien technology, such as the drones, the tic-tacs that we have seen, and other similar type of unmanned crafts that we have got stories of, plasma crafts, spheres with cubes inside of them, cube technology in itself, which I see in the fifth dimension as well, but some of the things are also here. And cubes are fifth dimensional, spheres are sixth dimensional, and then we have the different type of what we understand as unmanned crafts or android crafts that are fourth dimensional. So this is again where they come from. We could see that in the nuts and bolts of their technology. So they are in that huge process, sorry about that, of rearranging our reality field because of the breaking down of the original pillar crystals, and with the old world order gone and the colonizers having left and have retracted to their own parallel universal structures or joined the PUMs or whatever they have done. Everything is now changing. We have got a new group on top of the hierarchy. The last thing that needs to be demolished are what we call the power pillars under the Dark Ones, which has been unfolding the last 3 years since 2018 when they tried to take over with the galactic wave that hit us in on August 17th, 2017, from two two black holes that merged and sent a ripple of dark matter and dark energy from the third cycle into our universal matrix, and by that began the reconfiguration of it into aligning itself with the dark worlds. And from that, they were able to come in hordes and take over some of their human projects that they have been involved in since the 1950s, actually. So that's some of the projects, the higher level of the projects of the Atlantean project, the military projects. It has been on two levels to recreate what we call the master races of Atlantis, as well as recreating the scientists of Atlantis, as well as recreating what we call the hybrid projects of Atlantis, as well as, quote unquote, the superhuman soldiers of Atlantis military projects, using all genetics from Atlantean, and the stock on that one were delivered to the military project by the Dark Ones that were able to be in human form. And we're here talking about 7th and 8th dimensional Dark Ones, which still had the ability, like we could say the dark version of the Ascended Masters, to recreate an organic vessel inside this reality, because as I said, they actually used to be part of it, but they got so inverted. But that does not mean that they have lost their ability. On the contrary, they still have all of their abilities, but now in a completely inverted version, which means that everything they are is the complete opposition of the original universal cycles. So they have the full scale of the original universal construction within their worlds, but now in a completely inverted version. And they did, of course, not tell that to the military personnel of the bloodlines that were selected to be part of that project. Of course, it had to be bloodline because you already had to have the alien, what we call genetic configuration of Atlantis, dating back to Atlantis, but part of the reseeding, but also imbued with what we could call the 1,000-year sojourners, or different groups that came in and were here 1,000 years. Some of them were here 1,500 years. And with that, seeded in a new type of infusion into the mitochondria of the females that were taking as these breeder programs, which you in a way see mirrored in the second book, the second creational book in Genesis. The first one is all about the Elohim. The second one is about Yahweh Elohim. So that's all about the next group that came in and addressed these humans of the sixth cycle in as a curse, and put them into skin clothing, and whether it is skin on top of the already existing skin, or taking the light body and putting skin on it and creating the enslavement race, you decide yourself. We have similar stories in the Sumerian mythology and many other places on the planet. So that was the what we call the colonization of humans on our planet, which took place, began 15,000 years ago, but were completely put in place 12,500 years ago. And with that one ending the Little Ice Age and beginning the new landmass as we know of today. The reseeding after the fall of Atlantis in the fourth cycle after the fall of Atlantis were under the Syrian Pleiadians. And that one were the one that has taken the most severe hit. And they came under the, what we call supervision, if you like, of Enki, the one with reptoid genetics inserted. And you also know him as Satanel, or Satan, if you like, within the Bible stories, right? And with him came in a lot of eighth dimensional creatures, which were also locked invited in by Inanna, and with that we got the eighth dimensionals under the Orion Collective getting into this reality field. So it started a long time ago, but all revived in the 1950 military projects, as the Dark Ones handed over different forms of chimera genetics holding either Orion composition, Orion Pleiadian composition, Dark Atlantean composition, or whatever they had taken from their storage. Because as we have had portions of time on our planet where the Dark Ones have been in top of the food chain, and every time they have done so, have they harvested as much genetics as possible and created a library, which they always use for trade, and they get access that way. So they are enormously clever, and they are, as I said, original progressive humans that were inverted, and not by their choice. And this is the heartbreaking thing. Many of them are semi-eternal, so they have two options: either to fight to get back to what they were using the inverted consciousness structure, which is very difficult because when they are using the original progression dynamics, the highest purity rate for them will be in the dark matter. The highest standards will be in the inverted power-seeking, wrongful use of energy, and the highest progression rate will therefore be what we call consciousness potentials that grow out of darkening dark-like technology and consciousness configuration. So therefore they are always pushing themselves further into the abyss no matter what they do. So hence the infusion, but they can't adapt directly via the infusion, so they need the middlemen to do this, and that's how they have tricked many different races around in our universal matrix to invite them in, and we can technically say as they had traveled between the systems, have taken down one system after another. The Dracos were not affected that way. So originally that's why the Dracos came in here, to protect us from that. But of course they were also the ones that came in here. That's a long story. The king went into stasis. His replicated version of himself, called the prince, kind of decided he wanted to work with the dark ones, and there you have it. And then that kind of lost its original division, and these are the scavengers that we have got left now. These are the lesser developed versions of the original purity lineages of the Dracos. They have been very what do you call it? Not peculiar. There's another word. They have been very observant of not contaminating their lineages, because they have a very unique type of configuration, which is why so many races that are trying to activate themselves and regain their original consciousness potentials and their original middle domain organic forms are inserting reptilian genetics as an attempt to get that specific configuration that bounces off the inverted genetics. So, but anyways, that's just all of these kind of things. Some of you might discover this as you work your way through your own personal history, and others of you will not have even been close, because you were just in the middle domain, in what we call the vibrational level. And there you were part of these very beautiful, simple cultures that were working with the holographic energy to transform the solidified version of matter after the timeline event, such as we also know they were doing in Lemuria here. We were working, for instance, with, if you work with a very heavy type of solidified matter, such as the stone, if you work with the holographic field inside of it and the holographic network, with your consciousness and your high vibrating energy system that technically goes from the heart, then you're capable and able of transforming the solidified matter into a different type of state. Or if you would like to create some beautiful pottery or whatever, you're not doing it with your hands, you're doing it via altering the holographic network behind the solidified matter. And then you could, once you were done with that solidified again, then you would have a beautiful art or item that you have created. We know some of these granite vessels or pottery that's not pottery but made out of granite, and science are today looking at it and say, and they think they've done it with primitive Neanderthal technology, right? Of course not. It's done that way. Anyway, but we lost that. Quite a lot of that were taken away. The last real dip was 5000 BC, where things just went south, and that's where the Anunnaki came in. And yeah, the rest is just general history as you know of it, and that was just the enslavement program. And again, the Anunnaki were led technically by Anu, but he made two replicated versions of himself. That one that were working with the avian lineages, and by that created a Hilal, the soldier lineages, and then the other one, what was supposed to be the caretakers or the keepers of Enki, that was supposed to take care of the outer domain enclosure as it was. But of course, Anu went into stasis because he got very old and were beginning to deteriorate, and then his quote-unquote sons took over, and they did what all sons do. They get detached from the source of their origin, and here we're talking about the progenitor that ensured that they existed, and became individual beings and began fighting each other, and then divided our world amongst them. And Heliel teamed up with the Dark Ones, and Enki teamed up with the Scavengers and Inanna and the Orions, and there you have it. And then again, this division that constantly takes place. And Enlil, I think, also teamed up with Toth, but Toth, because he's avian, but kind of shifted from both sides. So I have a different classification when I talk about these old quote-unquote entities or extrasystemic or regressed races than you find in the Klontics, for instance. They are looking more at where they come from, where I'm looking more at them from a genetic point of view. And that's the terminology I use all the way through and through, because when we are working with when we're beginning to do the bridge builder steps, you have progression work, then you go into the Changemaker material where you learn to work with more what we say, well, what do you use the progression work for inside this reality? What's the headlines of the transformative work that we can do? I will return to that in 2 seconds. And then I go into the Pioneer work where we do the Forerunner 2025 Forerunner timeline, 2025 timeline Forerunner work. First as kind of defining what is a 2025 timeline Forerunner, and then going into the bridge builder where we begin to look at the molecular state of our existence, and so we can disconnect from the quantum field and the atomic field of electromagnetic energy and shift from the molecular state into what we could say the vibrational field and radiation field, and by that begin to recreate a code system in our biovessel that will allow us to connect to the 2025 timelines that are connected to the fifth dimension. And that's the highway that comes in with the event program and the new reality programs under the parallel universal matrix and whatever conglomerates they have made. So that's the new highway. So we're all focused on the fifth dimension now, but I'm trying to create a different path on the highway. And I use the analogy in the Changemaker courses. There are the Changemaker news and updates that are kind of running to the end of the year, where that will close up the Changemaker, because then we are going into 2023, and then it's the kickoff for the 2025 timeline. So we are here rounding up, but I also made the Changemaker course 1, 2, and 3, where I go through different skill sets and psychological processes. What we kind of call the traits of a the traits of a changemaker, or what is a changemaker. And then in course 2, we go into the skill sets of what we call, or the traits of a chaos pilot, because we are learning to navigate in chaos with our activation potentials. And then in course 3, I'm working with the skill sets of a path cutter, how we clear out karma, past timelines, and our connection to this, not just taking out the technologies, but also understanding the genetic link up that is to that, so that we are getting equipped to understand how we begin to cut a path to the future. And that's the highway right now as things are right now. The event program is being inserted into all levels of our reality field, including Europe and Denmark, where I am, but in different sections and under different races, of course. But that's the highway. All timelines are now being merged into one. It's been braided, all these different races that are here now working on the same highway. And our, as change makers, what we try to do is to arrange ourselves in this life so that we are on the highway, but we have our own car. We are driving our own car, of course, completely sustainable, renewable energy, not environmentally damaging or anything. Just point that out. Completely. We are hovering on that one on the highway. The others are still using gasoline and oil or whatever. We are using future technology, right? I'm joking here. But our car, I'm just using it as an analogy. The vessel that we are moving forward in is, of course, our physical form. And the highway is the new program. And we are on that amplification vector set up with the matrix of change I will explain in the next video. And our job in this one is to use the Changemaker material to understand you're part of this world, or we are part of this world. We are still doing our progression work. We have now learned the basics of and the advanced levels and the clearing work, and we have done that. And then we begin to understand, okay, we have to be here some 40 years or so. So what do we need to do then? How do we live with this higher order configuration and maintain it? We still have to earn money and pay the bills and put food in our mouth. And these are some of the things I'm talking about in the whole project material with the new living, as well as the new business, as well as the Changemaker. I've begun with the whole project Changemaker course material that's now done, of which there are 3 videos on this channel for free. That's part of course 4. And then I'm moving into the whole project New Living. Okay, now we kind of looked into the psychological features of being a change maker and a path cutter and a chaos pilot, and what that means to us and how we deal with that, including some of the original videos I did in the Future Human Project course 1 to 4, where I also look into the psychology of doing the progression work and how we are around others. But that were made in 2017, and now we are, and that's a good step out of the base program. The basics are good steps out of the base program. That's why it's called the basics, not because it's foundational per se, but that's the first step out of the base program, where I'm working with the human enclosure configuration, the factory setting, and teaching you, okay, this is where you shift your factory setting into beginning the progression work. And then you really kick in the transition sciences, where you really get the last pieces of how to do the progression work and what that actually entails, and leading into getting rid of the inserted alien technology in the advanced clearing work, and then go into the reconstruction work and the understanding of how to work with your template or your regional architecture behind the 6-layer transformative energy system, which are the top level of what we could say technically. As long as we have a physical form, that's the 3 lower levels. That's the organic outer domain version of it. And therefore, the 3 top levels of in our template will therefore only be what we call, what we prior have developed as our consciousness units inside this system. There will not be consciousness units from outside this system. So that's what we have to work with. And that's part of being a change maker, that we understand this is what we have. This is the raw material we have to work with. So we work with it in a manner where we're still doing our progression work, but we arrange ourselves in the human program, that the generic human program, let us call it that instead of the base program, the generic human program that's around us. And we are on the highway in our own vehicle. We are driving, following the teachings and the understandings of the progression work, maintaining our own energy system, our physical vessel. We are living in a way where we are speeding up our viability rate inside the physical form, and via the clearing work we're doing and the maintenance we are doing on ourselves, because there are no longer maintainers or little grays that are assisting us inside as they were under the old order program. So we're no longer being pulled in and recalibrated, because many of these grays have been taken over by the parallel universal matrix and now part of their programs. So that's not a good thing when you have a gray in your field. It's no longer there to take care of you. It's actually there to reconfigure you, to prepare you for the merge. So that's a no thank you, I'm not interested. So we're doing that one on our own, and that means that we must live as change makers all the time. We are not just social entrepreneurs. We can do that, but we must understand what is it that we are to change inside this reality? Is it actually to transform it into what we say within the normal generic human concepts of what reality is, or are we to change it into the 5th cycle? And that's what change makers do, and that's why the change maker material is the foundation for the forerunners, where we really begin to kick into the 5th dimensional sciences. So that's kind of taking the progression work and then put it into the outer domain in the change maker material, where we then learn to be in the outer domain, because the transition science is in the middle domain. Building the light body is in the middle domain, but you still have to maintain and live in the outer domain under the event program, hence the chaos pilot and the path cutter. So we know what we're dealing with. And to get to that point, we really understand the high way and the amplification rate of the matrix of change is the reason why I made this course material out for free, so that everybody kind of say, well, perhaps you are on a different upgrading program, but you will understand at least what's happening, again, from my point of view and what I've got of information. But as I said, I got the information in Australia 2018, so I kind of sat on that information for a long time, but also got the understanding that doomsday army would be put in first to do the purge, which we kind of have seen, right? It had to get really bad to get rid of the dark ones, because then the dark ones got into the outer domain, began to get into the physical form. And once they're inside the physical form, it's very easy to get rid of them again. It's very difficult to get rid of them when they're in the 8th dimension. So that's part of the strategy of what's been going on here, and goes with the saying, sometimes it has to get really bad before it gets good, or it's the dark night of the soul, or whatever you want to put it, because the guardian or the threshold that blocks us from the original reality field is, as always, lodged into our energy system. It's not just prohibiting technologies and energetic parasites. It is also the sum of all fears that we have had in this and in all lifetimes. So part of the work doing this is psychological. And that's why, as a psychotherapist, I can see that working as a psychotherapist and working with people, it was about getting through this life. And then we have, as Dolores Cannon, doing regression, getting people further back in past lives. And then once you get beyond that one, you go into the theta state. You then get into, okay, now we're outside the enclosure, and we are now in the what we call upper levels of your energy system. In the transformative energy system, or the Atlantean type of energy system, or whatever that's connected to your genetics, because each genetics has its own energy system configuration, all depending on which cycle you're a part of, depending on when you came into this reality field, or if you were dumped here, etc., etc. So some of you that were dumped here under the imprisonment contract, you have got an Orion system configuration that has no activation potential inside this reality other than being part of the dark ones, which we have also seen happening, which is why the dark ones can keep coming back, because of the darkened ones that were dropped here and part of the restoration program, and later on were kept actually in pockets of our reality that is in the 5th dimension. Anyways, so this is again bad decisions that comes back and bite you in the ass, as changes happen in reality fields, and the cycles change the energies. What was once secured, stored away in an enclosure or a pocket, upheld by a specific type of old word or technology, no longer has this configuration around it because of the dismantling of the original Pillar Project technology and everything that goes with that. And by that began to releasing these shadows. And since there were people inside this reality that had an affinity for them, because they carried genetics back to Atlantis, where they were active as well, and led to the fall of Atlantis, we had a search and a revival of these things, trying to create the new Atlantis as what we call the new, or the attempt to try and recreate Atlantis inside the enclosure. So that's one of the transformative processes into the 5th dimension under specific group. And then we have the parallel universal matrix that are going with their new Earth along with the technocrats. So new Earth is going to divide later on into the technocratic machine world, and then the other one, parallel universal matrix. So it's all about kind of this system, this thing that we are part of. It's outdated and it's running on its last song, as we say it in Danish. So similar, if you have a business, as in, it might have been a thriving business 50 years ago, but time changes, technology changes, people change, the supply and demand change. The same thing with our reality. It's no longer needed, and therefore it is being reconstructed, but it's not being reconstructed for our benefit. And that's some of the things that really needs to get hammered into your mind and your understanding, that everything that's happening here, unless of course you are of the regress races of the different parallel universal matrices, or you are a part of some of the groups that are working on the different agendas, on the different lineages, then you will be aligned with these, and that will be your family, and you will do what you have to do as our reality changes into a checkerboard reality, where the genetics and our energy system defines which perception and which sense of reality we have, and which version of reality that we will live within. And that's part of the event program as well, because it's going to, right now we're running on the same highway, but then it's going to divide into different branches that will lead to different futures that some of you are already seeing. And that what you're seeing will in a way define your current genetic composition and your current type of perception field. And if you don't like what you see, then it's time to do more clearing work. Then it's time to activate new levels of your original energy system and your original architecture of the stored in type of consciousness units that you have developed inside this reality field. I'm not talking about the enclosure. I'm talking about the original outer domain and what you came here to get rid of to begin with. Always remember that we didn't come here to camp and build bonfires and build castles and mansions and live here for eternity. The outer domain is where you get rid of your shit. So let us get back on track with the progression work and understand as changemakers, we are doing everything we can for the highest good of the many. Sometimes that means to cut loose and cut down and get rid of and throw out and burn or whatever of old items that no longer have use. Other times it means to take what is already in use and update it and upgrade it and add more in, because it can be transformed into something useful that's sustainable and renewable circulation of matter. We can definitely do that, whether it's an item or it's our own physical form that we keep maintaining and upgrading, because if we don't, it will go into entropy, since the entropy chaos powers are now of the planet are now so strong because of the deconstruction of the original technologies that are upholding the enclosure. So everything that's not maintained and upheld and constantly cleared and renewed every day in reconstruction work, self-healing work, self-scanning work, self-rebuilding work will begin to deteriorate, because we are very, very close to the abyss. And that's the pull from the abyss that is now literally sucking whatever is non-viable into the abyss as it's supposed to, because that's part of the original reality field. So that's the pull that we need to go against. And since the pull is now so strong, that's why the progressive worlds have made the call outs, which I talk about in template science course 4. That call out has come because we have gone into the planetary activation cycle. And that means our planet construction itself, 15 layers as the sun did from 2007 until 2022 here this spring. Our planet has begun the same process where it activates its different layers. You can call them shields. And from that one, as it sheds off its different shields, first the radiation shields and then the vibrational fields, and go into what we call the code layers. Then once that is done, then the core of our planet as we know of it will stop being infused with universal energies, and then the entire original construction behind our outer domain, middle domain, inner domain, and core domain, because it's from the core level that this happens, will begin to be pulled out. And that's the last phase of our solar system, where you said the sun has shut down, the planets are shutting down, and then the last thing will be the core domain that will begin its completion cycles and shut everything down. And then everything of the original ancient ones will be pulled out of this position and towed back to the original position in the middle domain of the progressive worlds, where it belonged under the D14 collective and the original universal cycles. So everything here is not to be maintained to prolong its existence, but we are, as changemakers, actively participating in cleaning up and shutting down and taking responsibility for our own stuff, as well as what we have of what we call affiliations with other races and other groups within humanity. That's the first step of the work. You'll do the outer domain, clean up with what we could say the spillovers you have with other people, unfinished business. And then once it's done, you will go into the middle domain, where you will then begin to work with your inner encounters of what's on your timelines of either actual life forms or non-organics or shells or ghost imprints or earlier configurations of what you used to be, and how you are to transform all of that. So you will do your clearing work of what you have been inside this reality. And as you do that, you will begin to remember more and more who you are, like going back into childhood memories. as you shut all that down because you had it as a defense mechanism. I don't want to go back to my unhappy childhood, right? So you created a new persona. You have built up defense mechanisms that keeps that persona intact. And then you create a comfort zone around you where you're functional and you don't go into all of the dirty laundry because you don't want to go there. It's emptiness. It's frightening. And you're going to, don't want to go there again because it's painful. Because as a child, it was painful and you experience things as a very, very strong energy. But as you also learn when you do psychological work, you learn that that's just defense mechanisms that are protecting you in your comfort zone, trying to keep you there. But you will discover later on, well, sometimes you actually have to cut through these defense mechanisms, tear down the walls, go in and relive your childhood trauma, so to speak, under the good caretaking of a psychotherapist that will hold your hand and be with you in the experience and explain to you, I get why it is so frightening for you because you were a kid, you were a child. It was very overwhelming and you didn't have the frontal lobe tools to deal with it. You didn't have the understanding of the world as you have today. Today, it's not so frightening, but as a kid, it was because things were happening. You didn't understand it. And that with doubt and who you were and feeling unloved and perhaps being frightened of the experiences you had in your family settings, it was overwhelming and the whole goes with non-understanding, then it was easier to shut down and go into exile, so to speak, just to do a rough round up. And the travel back of that one is to go through these different layers of the emotional patterns. And with that also understand, okay, they are tied to past life patterns. They are also tied to choices that you made in the original construction, before the hijacking and under the hijacking. So this is just psychological work that goes further and further back. You work with your past lives as if they were present life trauma. You work with your past timelines as if they were present timeline experiences. It's the same method, except that as you get further and further into the original reality field energies, you will discover more and more advanced technology that's connected to it because we are in the LPU where everything is created and upheld by technology. It's not that in the original progressive worlds under the defaulting collective, we have technology, but it works in a different way. So that's where I begun with the Changemaker. And I'll just there is only so much you can do on what we call a generic level there, on a general level or generic level, as I've done in the Changemaker course 1, 2, and 3. And then there is the whole project New Living, which for now just consists of free material, but I'm thinking about some course material there too. And then the whole project, New Business Models, that will in a way teach us, okay, when we're talking about living as change makers, exercise, food, everyday life, whatever, what does that mean? How do we constantly transform energy as change makers so that we're always in circulation and actually utilize the original potentials of the outer domain and are working in alignment with the function of the outer domain to shed off energies that are no longer of use, so we can reconfigure our energy system and upgrade it to its highest purity rate, its highest standards, its highest progression rate, from where we can return to the middle domain and continue our cycles of progression, right? And with that, we also need to have a business that we run. I'm strongly advocating for you to find a niche where you can create your own business. And that's some of the things I want to work with the business models, because being hired by someone else means you are contracted. You are restrained by someone else's energy system, ideology, and whatever faction they are working on. So we're going to have this extra systemic influence on business making, because that's part of the New Reality program. It's not about doing disclosure, because that's some kind of American thing, but it's actually to unraveling all of the covert military projects, right? That's the disclosure. We don't need to do that. What we need to do is to shift into the understanding of the other dimensionals and the interdimensional, the extra dimensional, the intradimensionals that we are part of, and the true understanding of a reality field, and then generate some sort of business that has, even though there is trade and even though there is exchange of some kind of medium, which we call money, that's also energy. So it's all about what type of energy are we producing in our businesses. And that's some of the things I'm working on as well. But that's, again, I'm just step building these things so that I take you by the hand and construct programs as well as classes and courses and free material and things you have to buy, so that you will learn these steps of being a transformative human that upholds your transformative energy system. And you transform your own energies by being who and what you are. And you transform the energies of your surroundings by being who and what you truly are. And you recreate everything that you were supposed to do in the outer domain, understanding that here we are doing the turnaround to get back into the middle domain. But we will live in the outer domain in a respectable, honorable manner where we follow the laws and the rules and the principles of the progressive worlds and the D14 collective. And that's where the whole Academy material comes in. That's where I'm talking from, and that's what I'm teaching in my class material. So with that one said, that was this video. And in the next video, we'll begin to talk about the matrix of change. Thank you.